My name is Adam, and I should have never stopped in that strange gas station. I was driving through a long stretch of empty highway, the kind where you can go miles without seeing another car. The gas gauge was dipping dangerously close to empty when I spotted a lone station on the side of the road. The neon sign flickered weakly. Miller's Gas and Rest. The place looked abandoned. Rusted pumps, a cracked window, a flickering light above the entrance. But I didn't have a choice. I pulled in, turned off the engine, and stepped out. A bell chimed as I pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of dust and something metallic. Behind the counter stood an old man, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. "Help you?" he asked, his voice dry, as if he hadn't spoken in days. I nodded. "Yeah, just need a fill-up." He stared at me for a long moment before slowly nodding. "Pumps on cash only." I handed him a few bills, then turned to leave. That's when I noticed them framed photographs lining the back wall. Black and white pictures of customers, decades apart, standing in this very gas station. And then I saw myself in the most recent photo. My stomach dropped. I had never been here before. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering. The old man didn't move, didn't blink. "That ain't you yet," he said softly, "but it will be." A gust of wind rattled the door. The station suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. The walls seemed to shift, the pictures flickering like static. I needed to get out, now. I bolted outside, fumbling for my keys. The gas pump was running, except my tank was already full. I hadn't even touched it. Then, from behind me, I heard it, a whisper. "Stay." I didn't look back. I threw myself into the car, turned the ignition, and peeled out of the lot, gravel spraying behind me. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, refusing to glance in the rearview mirror. After what felt like hours, I finally stopped at a diner down the road. I stumbled inside, out of breath, desperate for normalcy. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the waitress joked as she poured my coffee. I almost laughed until I saw the framed picture behind the counter. It was the same gas station, and in the window, barely visible, was the old man, smiling. I ran out of there without finishing my drink. But no matter where I go, no matter how many miles I drive, I know it's still waiting for me, and one day, I'll end up back there, just like everyone else in those pictures. My name is James, and I should have never set foot in that cursed town. I was on my way to visit an old friend, driving through a rural stretch of road when a sudden storm forced me to take an unfamiliar detour. My GPS lost signal, and before I knew it, I found myself on a narrow dirt road leading to a town I had never heard of. Black Hollow. It looked normal at first. Quaint houses, a main street with old-fashioned shops, even a little diner with its lights on. But as I drove deeper, something felt wrong. The streets were empty, too empty. No movement, no sound, not even the wind rustling through the trees. A sign ahead read, "Welcome to Black Hollow. Population 201. I blinked. The number changed, 202. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the sign, convinced I had imagined it. Then my car engine sputtered and died. No warning, no sign of trouble, just dead silence. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. A door creaked open nearby. I turned to see an old man standing on a porch, watching me with empty, unblinking eyes. "You best get inside," he said. "Storm's coming." The sky was clear. Something deep in my gut told me to refuse. But as I glanced down the road, I saw them figures standing in the shadows, motionless, waiting. The hairs on my neck rose. I grabbed my bag and followed the old man inside. The house smelled of dust and something faintly metallic. The furniture was antique, but it looked untouched, like it had been staged for a guest that never came. The old man gestured to a chair by the fireplace. "Sit," he said. "They won't come in as long as the fire's burning. I hesitated. Who won't come in? His cloudy eyes met mine. The ones who don't belong. A shiver ran down my spine. I turned toward the window and saw them again, more figures, now closer, just beyond the porch. Their faces were wrong, blurred and shifting, like static on an old television. Then the whispering started, soft at first, like leaves rustling in the wind. Then clearer. You are one of us now. The room dimmed. The fire flickered. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. The old man stood suddenly, his face twisted in urgency. You need to go now. I didn't question it. I grabbed my bag and bolted outside. My car's headlights flickered on by themselves, the engine suddenly roaring back to life. I dove inside, slammed the door, and hit the gas as I sped down the road. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The town was gone. Nothing but trees and an empty stretch of highway remained. No houses, no diner, no people. Just a single road sign standing, alone in the dark. Welcome to Black Hollow. Population 201, and beneath it, scratched into the wood, we never let them leave. My name is Lucas, and I should have never spent the night in that cursed motel. I was driving cross-country, exhausted and desperate for a place to rest, when I stumbled upon the Hollow Pine Motel. A neon sign buzzed weakly in the dark. Half the letters burnt out, but the vacancy light glowed bright. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, yet something about it felt occupied. I stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling as I approached the counter. A man, pale and stiff, stood behind the desk, his expression unreadable. His name tag read Edgar. Need a room? He asked, voice flat. I hesitated. Yeah, just for the night. He slid a key across the counter. Room 7. No noise after midnight. I forced a chuckle. Motel policy. Edgar didn't smile. Something like that. I grabbed the key and made my way down the dimly lit corridor. The air smelled of dust and something metallic, like old blood. My room was at the end of the hall. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was normal, outdated, but nothing out of the ordinary. A bed, a nightstand, an old TV. The bathroom door creaked when I pushed it open, revealing a small, stained sink and a mirror that looked far too clean compared to the rest of the room. Then I saw it, a note, wedged between the mirror and the wall. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Do not look at them. Do not open the door. Nitrogen monoxide, matter what you hear. A chill ran down my spine. I turned, scanning the room. Nothing seemed out of place. Just my overactive imagination messing with me. Then, at exactly midnight, the knocking started soft at first, barely more than a tap. But it came from the window. I was on the second floor, my breath hitched. I stayed frozen, staring at the thin curtains. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. Then from the door, tap, 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 dot. I backed up against the wall, heart hammering. A voice low and distorted slithered through the doorframe. Lucas, let us in. I didn't move, didn't breathe. A long silence stretched out. Then, the doorknob twisted. I clamped my hand over my mouth, holding back a whimper. The knob rattled violently. Shadows slipped under the door, stretching unnaturally across the carpet. My pulse pounded in my ears as I reached for my phone. No signal. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the knocking stopped. The air felt heavier, suffocating. I stayed up the entire night, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. When dawn finally came, I crept toward the door and slowly peeked outside. The hallway was empty. I grabbed my bag and bolted downstairs. Edgar was at the front desk, exactly where I had left him, staring ahead blankly. Checking out, he asked. I nodded, sliding the key onto the counter. My hands were shaking. Who was knocking on my door last night? For the first time, his lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "They always knock." I didn't ask anything else. I rushed to my car and sped off, leaving the hollow pine motel in the dust. But even now, when I'm alone in my apartment at night, I hear it tap, 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 and I know, one day, they'll find me again, and this time, I won't be able to keep the door closed. My name is Ethan, and I should have never stopped in that quiet little town. I was on a road trip, passing through unfamiliar back roads when my car's engine sputtered and died. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, I had no choice but to walk. That's when I saw the sign, "Welcome to Ravenswood." It was a small town, the kind you'd see in old postcards, quaint, picturesque, untouched by time. But something about it felt off. The streets were empty, the air too still. No birds, no wind, no sound except my own footsteps. A gas station sat at the end of the road, its neon sign flickering weakly. I stepped inside, relieved to find an old man behind the counter. "Car trouble?" he asked, before I could speak. I nodded. "Yeah, I think my battery's dead. Any place I can get help?" The old man wiped his hands on a rag and gestured toward the town square. "Mechanic's shop is over there, but it's late. Best to wait until morning." Something in his voice unsettled me, but I had no other options. I thanked him and decided to find a place to stay. That's when I noticed something strange. Framed photographs lined the station's walls, showing the same handful of people, in different eras, same faces, different clothes. The bell above the door jingled as I left, and I swore I heard the old man mutter, "You shouldn't have stopped." As I walked through the town, it became clear that Ravenswood was frozen in time. Storefronts displayed outdated newspapers. The streetlights buzzed faintly, casting shadows that stretched too far. But the worst part, the people, they were watching me, from windows, from alleyways, from the edges of my vision, never moving, never blinking, just watching. I quickened my pace, heart hammering in my chest. Then, in the distance, I heard a low, droning hum. Faint at first, but growing louder. The streetlights flickered. A shadow passed over the town square. Then they started walking. The people who had been so still, so silent, were now moving in unison. Their faces were expressionless, their eyes vacant. They weren't coming toward me. They were heading toward the church at the end of the street. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I ducked into an alley, pressing myself against the brick wall. The hum grew deafening, vibrating through my bones. Something was coming. I peeked out just as the church doors swung open. Darkness spilled out, thick and unnatural, swallowing the figures as they entered. The hum became a chorus, a deep, otherworldly chant that made my skin crawl. The last person stepped inside, and the doors slammed shut. Silence, then a whisper right behind me. "It's almost midnight." I turned, nothing was there. I ran. I sprinted back toward my car, my breath ragged, my mind screaming at me to get out. When I reached it, the engine started without hesitation. I didn't question it. As I sped away, I stole one last glance. In the rearview mirror, Ravenswood was gone. No town, no sign, just an empty stretch of road. But even now, when the clock strikes midnight, I still hear the hum, and I know that somewhere, Ravenswood is still waiting for the next traveler to stop. My name is David, and I should have never gone into that abandoned subway station. I've always been fascinated by urban exploration, crumbling buildings, forgotten tunnels, places that time has erased from memory. The Holloway subway station had been closed since the 1970s, sealed off after a series of unexplained deaths. It was rumored to be cursed, a place where people entered but never came back. I didn't believe the stories, not until I found the entrance, It was hidden behind a chain-link fence, rusted and half collapsed. My flashlight flickered as I stepped into the dark, the air thick with the stench of mildew and rot. The walls were covered in graffiti, warnings scrawled in desperate handwriting. D-O-N-T. Look at them, they see you too. Once you hear the voice, it's too late. I brushed them off as urban legend nonsense and pressed forward. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. The old tracks stretched into endless darkness, the skeletal remains of subway cars rusting along the platform. Then, I heard it. A train horn. It was distant, faint, like an echo from another time. My pulse quickened. The station had been abandoned for decades. No trains should have been running. And yet, the sound was getting louder. A gust of wind blew past me, carrying with it a whisper. He's coming. My stomach turned to ice. The words had been spoken directly into my ear, but I was alone. I spun around, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. That's when I saw them. Figures stood along the platform, their outlines flickering like candlelight. They didn't move, they didn't breathe, but I could feel them watching me. My skin crawled as I stepped back, trying to keep my gaze down, but something about them pulled at me. One of them twitched. I bolted. My feet pounded against the concrete as I ran toward the exit, but the station had changed. The walls stretched higher, the tracks twisted into impossible angles. My flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of something standing in the tunnel. Not human, not even close. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. It didn't move, but I felt it grinning. The sound of screeching metal filled the air as the phantom train approached, the ground trembling beneath my feet. The whispers returned, rising into a deafening chorus. He's here. I ran harder, my lungs burning. The entrance was gone. The walls pulsed as if they were alive, shifting, closing in. The figures on the platform turned, their heads snapping toward me in unison. Then, the train arrived. The air split with a shriek of rusted brakes. The subway car doors yawned open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. A final whisper slithered into my ear. Last stop. I threw myself backward, slamming into something solid. My vision blurred then. Suddenly, I was outside. Daylight. I lay sprawled on the cracked pavement outside the station, my heart hammering. The entrance I had come through was gone, replaced by an unbroken brick wall. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know how I got out. But I do know this. I wasn't alone when I left, because every night since then, when I close my eyes, I hear it, the train horn, and the whisper, last stop.